In a small, quiet village surrounded by wide fields and tall mountains, there lived a young girl who everyone knew, but not in a kind way. Whenever her name was spoken, it was followed by chuckles and whispers and sometimes cruel laughter. She was the girl people said would never achieve anything brave. The girl people said would always stay weak and small. Her clothes were plain, her hands rough from daily chores, and her eyes filled with dreams too big for the small space she was given. She often sat by the river and whispered her wishes to the flowing water. She wished to be respected, to be seen as more than the girl others mocked. Yet day after day the same story repeated. As she carried water jars, others pointed. As she worked in the fields, children giggled. As she walked past the market stall, old women shook their heads and said she is a dreamer, and dreamers are useless here. But the girl did not argue back. Instead, she kept her silence because deep inside her heart a fire burned, a quiet fire that no one could see. A fire that told her one day she would prove them all wrong. One day she would do something so bold that no one would ever laugh again. In the center of the village stood a stable that no one dared to enter alone. Inside that stable lived a horse unlike any other. Its body was strong, its mane wild, its eyes full of untamed fire. Men who prided themselves on strength had tried to ride it, but every single one was thrown down. Some were injured, some gave up forever, and the horse became a legend of fear. It was called the devil horse, the beast, the untouchable. Children grew up hearing the stories. Women crossed themselves when its name was spoken, and men boasted but never succeeded in taming it. The girl listened to these stories. She watched the way villagers spoke of the horse, how their voices lowered as if speaking of a curse, and in her heart she wondered, why does no one try to understand it? Why does no one look past its anger? Maybe there is something more, something hidden, something waiting to be seen. Every time the villagers laughed at her, she remembered the horse. Every insult felt like the kick of its hooves. Every giggle felt like the sound of its neigh. And deep inside she whispered to herself, if I can conquer that horse, if I can ride what no one else dares, then they will never laugh at me again. But the thought was dangerous. If anyone heard her say it out loud, they would laugh even harder. They would tell her to stay away. They would call her foolish, so she kept her secret inside, like a treasure buried in her chest. One evening, as the sun melted behind the hills and painted the sky red and gold, she stood at the edge of the field where the horse was tied. Its body moved like thunder. Its nostrils flared like fire. Its hooves struck the earth with fury, and the ropes that held it looked ready to snap. She felt fear. Her legs trembled, but her eyes refused to look away. She whispered softly, though no one could hear, one day I will ride you. One day I will not be the girl they mock. I will be the girl who tamed the beast no one dared to touch. The wind carried her whisper across the field. The horse turned its head for a brief moment, its dark eyes meeting hers, and in that instant something unspoken passed between them. Not trust, not yet, but not pure hatred either. It was as if the beast recognized her fire, as if it knew she was different from the rest, as if the story that had not yet been written had just begun to breathe. The next morning the laughter continued. Villagers gathered in groups to gossip. They spoke of her clumsiness, of her strange silence, of her foolish dreams, and once again she carried her basket through the crowd. Her head lowered, her lips pressed tight, but in her mind she saw the horse's eyes. She replayed the moment again and again, until it felt like a promise between her and the beast. A promise no one else could hear. The days stretched on. The whispers grew louder. And still she held her secret dream. The more they laughed, the stronger it became. The more they mocked, the deeper her fire burned. And though no one believed in her, though no one saw her worth, she carried inside her the vision of a day when the village would not laugh but stand in silence, watching with wide eyes when the impossible would become possible, and when she would no longer be the girl everyone laughed at, but the girl who changed everything. The villagers called it the devil horse, the beast, the untouchable, and even the shadow of death. Its legend was told from one generation to another. Every child grew up with warnings never to go near it. Every adult carried stories of failed attempts to control it. The horse was not only feared, it was almost worshipped as a creature too wild for human hands, too strong for human courage. Its body was tall and powerful. Its muscles rippled like waves under its dark skin. Its mane flew like a black storm when it ran. Its eyes were burning coals that glowed with fire. And whenever it neighed, the sound echoed through the valley like thunder shaking the earth. No man who tried to ride it lasted more than a few seconds. Some were thrown into mud, some were carried away with broken bones, and some left the village forever because shame followed them like a shadow. The stable was built stronger than any other in the village. with thick wooden beams, chains, and ropes that were replaced again and again, because the horse always found a way to break free. There were times when the villagers woke in the night to hear the sound of hooves tearing across the fields, the beast running wild under the moonlight, and men would gather quickly with torches, chasing it back into the stable. But every chase only made the horse more furious, every capture only made it wilder, and the story of its rage grew each time. The girl who everyone mocked listened quietly to every tale. She sat in corners when the old men shared stories at the fire. She leaned against walls when the women whispered warnings. She stood at the back of crowds when the hunters spoke of their bruises and failures. And while everyone shook their heads in fear, her heart raced with something else, not fear, not foolishness, but a strange curiosity mixed with courage. She wanted to understand what no one dared to question. Why was the horse so wild? Why did no one try to speak to it? Why did everyone only use ropes and chains instead of patience and kindness? One afternoon, as the sun burned hot above the roofs, a group of young men gathered in the village square. The chief of the village stood tall and proud. His voice carried over the crowd. He said once again the horse had broken loose in the night. Once again men had risked their lives to bring it back. And once again they had failed to control it. His face was heavy with anger and shame. He declared that anyone who could tame the beast would be honored, rewarded, and remembered forever. But laughter filled the square, because they knew no one would succeed. The girl stood at the edge of the crowd, her hands tight around her basket, her heart beating fast, and in that moment she wanted to step forward. She wanted to shout, "I will try. I will be the one," but her lips stayed closed, because she knew what would follow. She knew the mockery, the jeers, the rolling eyes, so instead she turned away. Yet inside her chest the fire grew stronger. She whispered to herself as she walked, "One day the chief will not laugh. One day the crowd will not mock. One day they will see me ride the beast they fear." That evening she went to the edge of the field again. The ropes pulled tight against the horse's body, its nostrils wide with anger, its hooves tearing into the dirt. Yet she did not move back. She stood still, her heart pounding like a drum, her hands trembling but her eyes fixed. She whispered softly across the distance, words no one else would dare to say. "I am not your enemy. I will not hurt you. I only want to know you." The horse neighed loud. Tossing its head high, the ropes rattled. The ground shook. But still she stayed. She did not run. She did not hide. And though the horse did not calm, something changed in that moment. For the first time, the beast did not ignore her. It looked directly into her eyes, and in those eyes she saw not only rage, she saw pain, loneliness, a hunger for freedom. And she realized the horse was not only feared because of strength, it was feared because no one had ever understood it. The villagers would have laughed if they knew she was there. They would have dragged her away, called her foolish and mad. But she kept her secret safe. She left quietly before the moon rose high, her footsteps light as whispers, her heart filled with fire. She knew this was only the beginning. That night was the start of something no one in the village could imagine. A bond forming in silence, unseen, unspoken, but stronger than chains. From that day the girl returned often, sometimes in the evening, sometimes at dawn. She watched the horse from the shadows. She studied its movements, the way it kicked, the way it calmed when the wind was gentle, the way it lifted its head when the stars appeared. And slowly she began to see patterns. Slowly she began to understand. The beast was not only anger, it was also sorrow. It was not only power, it was also spirit. And perhaps that spirit was waiting for someone brave enough to see it. The village laughed at her every day, mocking her clumsy steps, her quiet voice, her plain clothes, but none of them knew the secret she carried. None of them knew she was already walking the first steps toward a story that would one day silence their laughter. And though she said nothing, though she smiled softly and kept her secret hidden, the fire in her heart burned brighter with every whisper, every jeer, every cruel laugh, because she knew her day would come, the day when the beast would no longer be their fear, but her victory. The nights grew longer and the air colder. Yet the girl's courage grew stronger with each passing day. The laughter of the villagers rang in her ears, but instead of breaking her spirit, it fed the fire inside her heart. And when the stars shone above the silent fields, she would rise from her bed and walk quietly under the cover of darkness, her steps soft like whispers, her eyes fixed on the place where the horse was tied. At first she only stood at a distance, her body hidden behind trees, her breath shallow as she watched the beast stomp the ground with fury. Sometimes the horse neighed so loud it echoed across the valley. Sometimes it pulled against the ropes until they creaked like breaking branches. Yet she did not run, she remained still, her hands clutched tightly to a small bundle she carried. Inside it she kept pieces of grain and fruit she had saved from her own meals, offerings for the beast that no one dared to feed with bare hands. One night she left a handful of grain on the ground near the horse. Her heart raced as the animal sniffed the air, its head lifted high, its eyes glowing like fire under the moon. For a moment it charged at the rope and she thought it would break free and crush her, but then it stopped, its nostrils flaring, and slowly it lowered its head to the ground, tasting the grain she had left. She stepped back quickly, her legs shaking, but her lips curved into a small trembling smile. It had accepted the gift. From that night onward she returned again and again, each time leaving food a little closer, each time daring to step a little nearer. The villagers slept unaware of the secret meetings between the girl they mocked and the beast they feared. By day she endured their jeers, but by night she lived another life. A life where courage was her companion and patience was her weapon. And though the horse still kicked and neighed and showed its rage, she began to notice small changes. Its eyes followed her. Its ears twitched when she spoke in soft whispers, and it no longer lunged at her with the same wild fury as before. There were times when fear almost swallowed her, nights when the horse charged and snapped its teeth, nights when the rope strained and the sound of hooves against earth thundered so loud she thought her heart would burst. Yet she did not run. She planted her feet firmly on the ground, her voice shaking yet steady enough to say, "I am not afraid of you. I will not leave, you will know me one day." The village boys sometimes spied on her, curious about her strange habits. They saw her carrying scraps of food. They followed her once, and when they discovered she walked toward the stable, they laughed until tears rolled down their faces. The next morning they told the whole village, calling her mad, foolish, and cursed. The women shook their heads, the men smirked. The children mocked her even louder, but none of that stopped her. Their laughter only made her heart burn brighter. Their jeers only made her step stronger, because she knew something they did not. The beast was beginning to see her not as an enemy, but as something different. Weeks turned into months, and the girl's patience became her shield. Slowly, the distance between her and the horse shrank. One night, as the cold wind blew across the field, she stood close enough to feel the heat of its breath. The horse snorted, its body tense, its muscles ready to strike, yet she raised her hand slowly, her palm open, her fingers shaking. The silence was so deep she could hear her heartbeat echo in her ears. She whispered softly, "You are not alone, I will not hurt you. I am here." The horse stomped the ground, its head jerked. For a moment she thought it would attack, but then it paused. Its flaring nostrils brushed against her hand, and though it pulled away quickly, that single touch was enough to fill her eyes with tears. She had touched the beast, the same beast that had thrown down the strongest men in the village, the same beast no one dared to go near. She had touched it without chains, without whips, without force, only with patience and courage. The next morning, when she walked through the market, the villagers shouted her name in mockery. They called her the girl who fed the devil, the girl who wasted her nights on foolish dreams, and though the words stung, she lowered her head and smiled secretly, because she knew the truth they could never imagine. The beast was beginning to trust her, and that trust was worth more than all the laughter in the world. That night she returned again, her steps lighter, her voice calmer, and when she spoke the horse listened. When she placed food it did not stomp with anger but ate quietly. When she stood close, it did not charge but stayed still. The bond was forming slowly, invisible to the world, but strong enough to change everything. She knew the road ahead was long. She knew danger still waited, but her heart whispered the same words again and again. "One day I will ride you. One day the village will see. One day the laughter will end." And under the silver glow of the moon, the beast lowered its head as if listening, as if it too understood that something greater was coming, something that would shake the village forever. Something that would turn fear into wonder and mockery into silence. The story of a girl and a horse, both untamed, both waiting for the moment when they would rise together. The night was quiet and the air was cold. The moon hung above like a silver lantern, casting its glow across the empty fields. The girl walked slowly toward the stable, her hands trembling but her eyes steady. She had waited for this moment, dreamed of it, feared it, and longed for it. Tonight she would try to do what no one else dared. Tonight she would reach for the beast. The horse stood restless, its dark mane flying in the wind, its hooves striking the ground with anger. The rope strained as if ready to snap. Its eyes burned like two flames, daring anyone to come closer, yet she did not stop. She moved one step, then another, her breath shallow, her heart beating louder than the sound of hooves. She whispered softly, not to calm herself, but to speak to the beast. Her words simple, "I am here, I am not your enemy." I only want to know you, the horse neighed. It sounded sharp and wild like thunder breaking the silence. The girl froze for a moment. Fear clawed at her chest, but she refused to move back. She remembered the countless nights she had watched from afar, the weeks she had left food, the months she had spoken in whispers. She remembered the single moment when the horse's breath had brushed against her hand, and she knew this night could not be wasted. She had to try again. Step by step she closed the distance. The ropes creaked. The beast tossed its head. Its muscles rippled with tension, but her voice flowed like a gentle river. Soft and steady, I will not harm you. I am not like them. I see you. I hear you. I believe you are more than their fear. She stretched her hand slowly, every finger trembling, every second heavy with danger. The night air so thick it felt like even the stars held their breath. For a moment the horse jerked back. Its nostrils flared, and the girl thought it would strike. She thought it would end with her body broken on the ground. Yet the beast only snorted. Its eyes locked on hers, wild but searching, as if torn between rage and something deeper, something hidden. Then slowly, so slowly it leaned forward. Its hot breath brushed against her hand, its skin rough beneath her trembling fingers, and at last she touched it, her palm resting against the mane of the untouchable. Her eyes filled with tears, not of fear but of triumph. Her lips curved into a smile that no one in the village had ever seen, a smile of quiet victory. The beast did not throw her down. It did not bite or kick. It allowed her touch, only for a moment. But that moment was enough to change everything inside her. She whispered again, softer than ever, "You are not alone, I am with you. I will never hurt you." Then the horse jerked away, tossing its head high, pulling against the ropes, neighing so loud it shook the ground. The girl stepped back quickly, her chest heaving, her legs weak, yet her heart stronger than ever, because she had done what no man had done before. She had touched the beast with nothing but patience and courage. No chains, no whips, no force, just trust slowly built in silence. The next day the village was alive with gossip. The boys claimed they had seen her near the stable. The women shook their heads and whispered she had lost her mind. The men laughed loudly and called her cursed. They said she would be killed if she kept playing with the beast. But the girl said nothing. She lowered her head, carried her basket, and let them laugh because their laughter no longer mattered. She carried a secret they could never imagine, a truth that burned brighter than their words. She had touched the beast, and it had not destroyed her. That night she returned again. The bond fragile but alive, she stood closer than ever, her voice softer, her movement slower. And though the horse still stamped the ground and pulled at the ropes, it no longer charged with the same blind rage. It watched her, listened to her, and allowed her presence. The line between fear and trust was thin, but it was real, and she walked that line with every breath, every whisper, every step. The moon rose high. The wind carried her voice like a song across the field. The beast's ears twitched, its eyes calmer now, its body still powerful yet less wild. And in that silence she felt the future calling. She saw the day when she would climb onto its back. She saw the crowd that would gather. She saw the shock and awe in their eyes. She saw the laughter silenced forever. And she knew this journey was no longer just about her. It was about proving that courage could grow from kindness, that patience could tame what force could not. As dawn began to break, she turned back toward her home, her steps slow but steady, her heart filled with strength she had never known. The village still mocked her. The men still bragged and failed, but none of that mattered, because she knew what they did not. She knew the beast had begun to see her not as a threat, but as something else, perhaps a friend, perhaps a partner, perhaps the one who would change its fate. The girl who had always been laughed at was now walking a path unseen, a path only she could see, and with each step she carried the memory of that first touch, the moment that proved the impossible was not beyond reach, the moment that told her the story was only just beginning, and that greater trials awaited, greater risks, greater dangers, but also greater victories, victories that would echo forever. The morning sun rose over the mountains and painted the sky with bright colors. The village was alive with sound and movement. Today was the day of the great festival, a day when the villagers gathered to celebrate with music, food, and contests of strength. But this year the festival carried something more. It carried the challenge of the beast, the horse that no man had ever tamed, the horse that had thrown down every rider, and everyone whispered with excitement and fear. Men prepared themselves with pride. They oiled their arms, tightened their belts, and sharpened their courage. They spoke loudly of how they would succeed, how they would ride the horse and win honor. Yet behind their brave words their eyes carried doubt, because each of them knew the truth. The beast was stronger than their boasts, fiercer than their courage, and no rope or chain had ever held it for long. The chief of the village stood tall in the square. His voice boomed as he reminded the crowd of the promise. Whoever could ride the beast would earn respect, reward, and glory. Their name would be remembered for generations. The villagers cheered, though some laughed nervously, because they had seen the beast rage too many times, and they doubted anyone could succeed. The girl stood at the edge of the crowd, her hands clasped, her heart pounding like thunder. She watched as man after man stepped forward, each full of pride, each determined to prove himself, and one by one they failed. The beast threw them down like dry leaves in a storm. Some landed hard on the ground with bruises, some crawled away in shame. Some did not rise quickly at all, and with every fall the laughter of the crowd grew louder, mocking the men who had boasted too much. But when the last man fell and the crowd jeered, a strange silence followed. A silence filled with curiosity, for out of the crowd stepped the girl, the same girl they mocked every day, the same girl who was called foolish and weak. She walked forward with calm steps, her head high, her eyes steady, and her voice quiet but clear. "I will try." The crowd exploded with laughter. Men slapped their knees. Women covered their mouths. Children pointed and shouted. Some cried out that she was mad. Others begged her to stop before she was killed. The chief frowned deeply, his face red with anger and disbelief. He said, "Girl, you are no warrior. This beast will destroy you. Go back to your place." But she did not move. She stood firm, her voice steady. "I have watched the beast. I have learned from it. I will not fail." The chief shook his head. He warned her again. "If you fall, you will never live it down. If you fail, the laughter will never end." But the girl only answered, "The laughter has never ended anyway." And she turned toward the beast, her steps slow but certain. The crowd fell into uneasy silence. No one had expected this. No one could look away. The beast tossed its head high, its mane flying like a storm, its eyes blazing, its hooves striking the ground. It was wild, furious, unbroken, but the girl walked closer without fear, her voice soft and steady, words only the horse could hear. "I am here, you know me, I am not your enemy. Today we show them together." The villagers leaned forward, their eyes wide, their mouths open, waiting for the moment of disaster, waiting for the beast to crush her, waiting for her to scream, but she did not flinch. She placed her hand on the neck of the beast, and the horse did not strike. It trembled, it snorted, but it did not throw her aside. It knew her. It remembered the nights, the whispers, the food, the patience, the touch, and though it was restless, it did not break away. Gasps spread through the crowd. Whispers rose like wind. They could not believe what they were seeing. The girl who had always been mocked stood beside the beast without chains, without whips, without fear. She stroked its mane, her eyes shining with quiet fire, and then she did the unthinkable. She placed her foot against its side and began to climb. The crowd roared in disbelief. Some shouted at her to stop, some cursed her, some prayed, but no one looked away. The air was heavy. The world seemed to pause. The girl swung her leg over the beast and sat upon its back, her hands gripping its mane, her body trembling but unbroken. And in that moment, the festival square fell into silence. The beast reared high, its hooves slicing the air, its neigh loud as thunder. The crowd screamed, but the girl held on, her voice soft in the storm, calm words flowing into the ears of the furious creature. "I am with you. You are not alone, trust me." And though the beast bucked and twisted, though it fought with all its power, she did not fall. The chief stood frozen. The villagers stared wide-eyed. Children clung to their mothers, and the girl remained on the beast's back, her face pale with effort but her spirit fierce. The laughter that had haunted her life was gone, replaced by silence, by awe, by the first spark of respect. The festival was no longer about games, no longer about contests. It had become the moment when the girl they mocked stood against the impossible and did not fall. And though the beast still raged, though the danger was not over, the story had already changed, and the village would never see her the same way again. The beast reared high, its hooves slashing through the air. Its neigh shook the sky like rolling thunder. The villagers cried out in fear. Some covered their faces, some held their breath. They were sure the girl would fall. They were sure the beast would throw her to the ground and crush her like it had done to so many before. But the girl held on, her arms tight around its mane, her body swaying with each violent movement, her heart pounding but her spirit unbroken. The horse twisted and kicked, its muscles rippling with wild power. Its eyes burning with fire, it leapt and bucked, trying again and again to break free of the weight upon its back. Yet the girl clung to it with courage greater than her fear, her lips moving softly, whispering words no one else could hear. I am with you, you know me, I am not your enemy, trust me, trust me. And though her voice was small against the storm, it carried strength, it carried truth, and the beast listened. The crowd gasped as the wildest horse in the land began to slow, its violent rage turning into restless movement, its neigh still fierce but less furious, its hooves striking the ground with less fury, and though it still tossed its head and pulled, it no longer tried to throw her down with blind rage. Instead, it moved in circles, its breath heavy, its eyes locked on hers, and she leaned low, her hand stroking its neck, her voice steady like a river flowing in the dark. I am not here to break you. I am here to stand with you. Minutes passed like hours. The square silent except for the sound of hooves and whispers of awe. Then slowly, unbelievably, the beast stopped fighting. It stood tall, its body still tense but no longer wild. The girl sat upon its back, her chest rising and falling, her eyes shining with tears. And in that moment the impossible had happened. The beast was not conquered by chains, not broken by force, but calmed by patience, by kindness, by trust. The villagers stared in shock. No one spoke. No one laughed. They could not believe their eyes. The girl they had mocked all her life now sat upon the beast no man had dared to ride. The girl they had called weak, foolish, useless, now glowed with courage greater than any warrior, and silence spread through the square like a wave. Heavy, powerful, unshakable, the chief of the village stepped forward. His face pale, his voice trembling, he said, "No one has ever done this, no man, no hunter, no warrior, and yet you, the girl we laughed at, you have done what we could not. You have shown us courage beyond our pride." He lowered his head, his voice softer. "From this day no one will mock you again." The girl looked around at the crowd. She saw the wide eyes, the open mouths, the faces filled with awe and shame, and though her heart swelled with triumph, she did not smile with pride. Instead, she lifted her chin and spoke clearly. "This is not only my victory. It is the beast's as well. It was never only a monster, it was never only rage. It only needed someone to listen, someone to be patient, someone to see it for more than its fury, and I did." The villagers lowered their heads. Many felt shame for their cruel laughter. Some wiped tears from their eyes. Children clung to their mothers, whispering that they wanted to be brave like her. Men who once mocked her stood silent, unable to deny what their eyes had seen. Women who had pitied her now looked at her with respect. The air was heavy with change, a change that no one could stop. The girl guided the horse gently across the square, her movements soft, her hands firm but kind, and the beast obeyed. It walked with pride, no longer furious but powerful, a creature not of fear but of respect. Its steps echoed like drums of victory, and the crowd parted before them in silence. Some knelt, some bowed. All watched in awe as the girl and the beast moved together as one. When she stopped in the center of the square, the beast stood calm, its head lowered, its eyes steady, and the girl stroked its mane, her voice soft. "We are one now, you and I. No chain will bind you again, no laughter will wound me again. We have proved them wrong together." And the horse snorted gently as if it understood. As if it agreed. From that day, the story of the girl and the beast spread beyond the village. Travelers carried the tale to other lands. Songs were sung. Fireside whispers grew into legends. She was no longer the girl mocked by her village. She was the girl who tamed the untouchable, the girl who conquered not with force but with patience and love. And the horse that once filled hearts with terror now filled them with wonder. The villagers never laughed at her again. Instead, they honored her. They looked to her for wisdom. They told their children of her courage. And every time she walked through the square, she walked with her head high. Not in pride, but in quiet strength. For she knew her true victory was not over the beast, but over the cruelty of the world that once belittled her. And so the girl who was mocked became a legend, and the horse that no one dared to ride became her companion. Together they walked through the fields, through the valleys, through the mountains, free and fearless. And their story lived on, a story of courage, patience, and the bond between two untamed hearts.